So now we transition to our second overarching topic for discussion for today, and I'll invite our second panel to the stage. So here we, as previewed, will be building on our discussion this morning, which focused on the direct symptoms and health effects of MPN and the impacts that those burdens have on your daily life. Now we want to understand more about current approaches to treatment that this community utilizes. And when we refer to treatments, we refer to it broadly. Not only do we speak to pharmaceutical or biological products or drugs, but also medical procedures, different alternative approaches that you might employ, whether that be alternative medicines or things like diet or exercise, but also lifestyle modifications. There's many, as you taught us this morning, are many burdens and impediments in daily life. And so there might be things that you do in your daily life to just make that day-to-day life that much easier. And so we want to explore what those things are. We want to hear from you about them. We want to know how well they're working for you in addressing those things that you spoke to this morning. Not only do we want to know how well they're working, but we do want to understand any downsides that might exist to those treatments, whether that be side effects, duration of treatment, or anything else that you might view as a downside. And once we've appreciated the approaches of treatment that you currently use or that you may have used, any changes in your treatment over time, we're then going to look to the future and ask you to help us understand what it is that you would want from a future treatment. And we'll explore that a little bit. But like the morning session, to get us started on this discussion, we have a fantastic panel for you today. We have two panelists that provided their testimony by video. So in total, we have David, Carrie, Diane, Stephanie, Ned, and Nancy. And I'll ask David to get us started.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm David Alexander, a full-time 64-year-old government attorney in Washington, a dedicated bicycle commuter and one-time marathon runner. I also find myself as president of the MPN Education Foundation, which you heard mentioned earlier. We're an all-patient, volunteer, charitable organization. I was diagnosed with PV in 2005. I was a regular blood donor, and I donated nearly 50 units between the age of 18 and my PV diagnosis, and I felt better afterwards. In essence, I was prescribing my own therapeutic phlebotomy. It's entirely possible, therefore, that I've had my disease for a very long time. I had silent migraines for decades before diagnosis, and also for 10 years before my diagnosis, I couldn't improve my first marathon running time, and I should have been able to because, frankly, I blew it. Culminating 2 years before my diagnosis when I couldn't even keep up with my friends on an easy warm-up jog. My doctor dismissed my concerns, but I knew something was wrong. I sought attention where I could find it, and a year before my diagnosis, an NIH tongue researcher insisted that I was iron deficient. She said she could see it from the tongue. But when I iron supplemented with my doctor's permission, my hematocrit rose to 63% in only several months. At that time, my cognition was severely affected. I couldn't readily use a map. I'd find the milk in the cupboard, cereal in the fridge, and I'd lose my keys, only to find them in my left hand. My day job did not go well. Disease progression for me was exemplified a decade after diagnosis by increasing fatigue, muscle pain, lack of concentration, and especially life-stopping pruritus. Don't let anybody tell you that pruritus is only itching and only after a shower. It was nearly body-wide pain, worse than any burn I've ever had, and punctuated by stabbing horsefly bites for 1 to 3 hours, day or night. It was so bad I was unable to fix a glass of ice water, which I thought helped, or say more than 3 words. Due to fear, I dared not go out in the rain, work out, or even sleep under covers. I kept my office so cold, I was forced to label my door Polar Bear Sanctuary to apologize to coworkers who might enter because no one would know anything was wrong. During attacks to ease pain and prevent from damaging my skin, I used manic dry scrubbing with a construction adhesive pad, which also served as effective washing without water. This situation lasted until about a month after I started Jakafi. And I also do want to insert here, there are reported suicides from pruritus. And with my experience, I understand it, especially if it's unrelenting. I started Jakafi in 2016 solely against intractable pruritus, and instead of thrice-weekly prescribed ultraviolet radiation, which I also tried. Jakafi was the first drug that worked, and I tried a dozen, and also increased my energy and exercise capacity measurably and objectively within 2 days, a change not possibly related to any change in iron status. Jakafi allowed me, I'm grateful, to help care for my mother with full dedication during her last 2 years with advanced Parkinson's. Jakafi reduced my palpable spleen from 13 centimeters to less than 4. That's palpable spleen. While bicycling, I no longer needed to wear the spleen protection that I devised, a reinforced fly fishing vest, to avoid a repeat of a seemingly small bang in just the wrong place, the exposed spleen, which once left me on the couch for a month. All was good, and Jakafi also regularized my continuing phlebotomy interval and eventually also normalized all my counts, or almost, all of which were very, very high. Won't mention the numbers because they don't matter. I was on Jakafi from 2016 to 2019 when, incidental to another study at NIH, I was diagnosed with Cryptococcus neoformans, a dangerous fungal infection that can be life-threatening, as those professionals who are familiar with treating HIV patients know. This required, and I don't have HIV, this required stopping the drug due to its immune-suppressing effects. An ideal treatment for me, as you've gathered, would be to do for me what Jakafi did for me without causing high-risk infections. I now have cognitive issues, and have had for these decades, that have now been diagnosed as transient global amnesia. They were unchanged by Jakafi. They occur periodically and have incapacitated me for important work meetings and resulted in my first ever hospital admission. Transient global amnesia is characterized by inability to form new memory. Not good. Although not classic TIA, my MPN expert believes these episodes may be related to PV coagulation risk. Another researcher has wondered how prevalent this phenomenon is among MPN patients generally, including, I think, some who describe TIA. But this is not concentration issues, this is an attack. Reaching our mutual goals requires signing up adequate numbers of qualified patients to trials. We all recognize that. I would consider a clinical trial directed at mitigating intractable quality of life problems or extending life, but you will understand that I want to be confident not only that the benefit is real, but also that the ongoing risks are properly assessed. Accordingly, I would be willing to sign up, even travel, to a study as long as it included placebo arm and the promoter and FDA committed to conducting and reporting controlled post-phase 3 studies. I feel I and patients generally are owed that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carrie Schwartz. I'm 48 years old and I have polycythemia vera, or PV. I live in Northwest Indiana, which is on the far south part of Chicagoland, with my husband, my 2 kids, my 2 dogs, and my 2 cats. I am an avid bicyclist and I also enjoy gardening. I was diagnosed with an MPN during my first pregnancy. At that time in 2007, I was pregnant with my son, and routine blood testing revealed extremely elevated platelet counts. Additional testing revealed that I have the JAK2 V617 mutation. This mutation had only been discovered 2 years earlier in 2005. Despite my diagnosis, my pregnancy with my son went well, and I was able to carry him to term with only the addition of low-dose aspirin to address my NPN. My son is now 11 years old, and he's healthy, and he's doing great. My husband and I desperately wanted to have another child, and unfortunately, my MPN diagnosis posed a significant obstacle to having a second child. Soon after I gave birth to my son, my condition progressed from ET, or essential thrombocytosis, to PV, polycythemia vera. With PV, all of my blood counts were elevated, my white counts, my red cell counts, and my platelet counts. My husband and I wanted that second child, but unfortunately I suffered 2 miscarriages and my blood counts were skyrocketing. Also during this time, I received more bad advice from a hematologist at one of the Midwest's top hospitals than you might expect, who told me that I could take hydroxyurea to control my counts during pregnancy. I was fortunate to meet Bob Rosen of the MPN Foundation and become acquainted with the MPN Foundation. Bob told me about Dr. Jamil Shamo, who specializes in the treatment of MPNs. I switched my treatment to Dr. Shamo, and she prescribed Pegasus, or the time-release version of pegylated alpha interferon 2A. Pegasus has worked amazingly well to control my blood counts. It allowed me to get pregnant and carry my daughter, my second child, to term, and she's now a healthy 8-year-old, and that is because of having been prescribed Pegasus interferon. At the time, I had also looked into possible clinical trials, but none were available that were doing Pegasus that I could enroll in, so I sought and fought for insurance coverage for Pegasus, and luckily I was successful. It is because of Pegasus interferon that I was able to have a second child. For me, having a therapy that I could take during pregnancy safely made all the difference in having one child and being limited to a single child, or having a second child. And there are few things in life as important. Fast forward to today, it's 10 years that I've been, almost 10 years that I've been on pegylated interferon, and it has worked amazingly well for me and allowed me to live a more or less normal life. I've experienced very few side effects from Pegasus, some aches, dehydration, but all of those are manageable and certainly well worth it. I've had an excellent quality of life with no discernible progression of my disease. Unlike many PV patients, I've experienced no spleen enlargement, no thrombotic events, no progression to leukemia, and no progression to myelofibrosis, like many PV patients experience. And Pegasus has also allowed me to avoid phlebotomies almost entirely, and it's been some years since that has been required for me. Also, my blood counts are basically normalized. Despite this, living with an MPN is living with a blood cancer, and there are difficulties. My thought is that now is the time to expand available treatments and access to drugs to improve patient quality of life and longevity. And one of the best ways to do this would be to encourage the development of generic biologic drugs and to bring those to market. Embracing the new, longer-lasting version of pegylated interferon that has been approved in Europe would also be a fantastic improvement for patients with PV like me, because it would allow shots once every 2 weeks instead of weekly. If future clinical trials were available for such medications, I would be interested in participating in a clinical trial. My only requirement that I would have is that some form of interferon be available to every patient in the trial. For me, if there were an ideal treatment, Pegasus interferon has been it. I would like to make that a treatment be available to all MPN patients who want to have children. In short, despite my diagnosis, because of my access to Pegasus or pegylated interferon to address my condition, I feel incredibly lucky to live in an age where where we have continually improving treatments. Pegasus allowed me to have a second child, my daughter, and to live a basically normal life. It's been my great privilege to speak to you at the MPN Foundation's invitation. I thank you for all the wonderful work that you do in helping bring new therapies to market for the class of diseases from which I suffer, which are myeloproliferative neoplasms, or MPNs. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane, and I was diagnosed with essential thrombocythemia in 2005 after a physician noted high platelets during routine blood work. I'd never heard of ET and was rather shocked when he referred me to a hematology oncologist. A positive JAK2 test and a bone marrow biopsy confirmed the diagnosis. My first thought was, let's get some sort of medication, kick this thing to the curb, and move on. Then I discovered that ET was something that did not have a cure, and I was at increased risk of blood clots, strokes, and other unpleasant things for the rest of my life. At first, treatment was watchful waiting and low-dose aspirin. Around 2012, the platelets began to creep up, and for the first time, my hematocrit started to rise. A low EPO level helped confirm that the ET was now polycythemia vera, so I added phlebotomies. The following year, my hematologist and I decided to be proactive instead of waiting for some sort of health crisis. He suggested hydroxyurea, HU, but I asked to give pegylated interferon a try. I'd read there was a chance of remission with PEG, and I wanted to give it a go, despite the possible side effects and my queasiness with needles. The PEG definitely caused flu-like symptoms, but only for the first couple of injections. Then dosage was adjusted because of rising liver enzymes. Within a year, however, my lab work was normal, and I started to reduce the amount of PEG and the frequency of injections. In April 2017, about 2.5 years after I had started PEG, I stopped taking it. My blood counts were good, but unfortunately, my JAK2 allele burden percentage had not zeroed out, so I didn't experience the hope for molecular remission. But that was okay, because I was off the medication. And I think that the choice I made at the time was the right one for me, and I hope that it slowed down the disease progress and possible progression. So all was good for the next year until the platelets and hematocrit started to slowly increase once again. At this point, I'm back to phlebotomies and low-dose aspirin. One thing treatment has not done is reduce my symptoms of the disease. The most bothersome, as I noted earlier, is constant fatigue and night sweats. I believe both contribute to my inability to concentrate and my brain fogginess. I do my best to hide it and have even thought about retiring because it's embarrassing to not be my best professionally. My adult children think I have early dementia. I hate PV's impact on my personal life as well. Despite fatigue and because of my personal stubbornness, I continue to hike and run. And even though I experience on and off PV-caused erythromyalgia that makes the soles of my feet feel like they are on fire. Last year, I spent 4 very hard days hiking the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and I often wonder what the trek would have been like if I had not had that PV fatigue and the burning feet to deal with. Next year, I want to spend a couple of weeks hiking and kayaking in New Zealand. My mind says go for it, but my PV symptoms have me second-guessing the trip. I really don't want to stop being active. I don't even know what is normal anymore, as fatigue has been a part of my life for so long. Doctors ask how I feel. I really just don't know what to say, because I have no point of comparison anymore. Another risk is what's next. I turned 60 in January, which thrusts me into the high-risk category, whether I like it or not. I've already seen my disease morph from ET to PV as the next step, myelofibrosis. Because of my age, my doctor recently told me it's almost time to start thinking about HU and taking some sort of medication again. I've done enough research to know that mouth sores and other side effects are likely, which is not a comforting thought. There's always the option to resume interferon despite not knowing its long-term impact. PEG also requires refrigeration and needles, which complicates my frequent work and personal travel. In my view, there's simply no good choices when it comes to medication. I feel like I'm faced with choosing the lesser of two or three evils. I'd say my biggest wish, other than a cure, is that the treatment I ultimately end up with to manage my disease also reduces the symptom burden without the risk of additional side effects. I hope some of you in this room can make this happen for me, as well for those who are yet to discover that they too have an MPN. Thank you to everyone who has put this together today. This program's been great, and thank you for listening to my story.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Syndrich. I am a patient with essential thrombocythemia. I'm 39 years old now, but I was diagnosed with ET at the age of 16. At that time, I had had a possible TIA. My platelet count was 1.3 million. And that is where my journey with MPNs began. I had a rare blood cancer that was practically unheard of in children at the time. And so there was a general concern amongst the hematologist of how I would be treated. There were three options available at the time: anagrelide, interferon, and hydroxyurea. And due to my age, there was a consensus of thought that the interferon was going to be the least toxic for me. Being on interferon, there were many side effects, including severe fatigue, body aches, flu-like symptoms. I lost a lot of my hair. And after years of being on interferon, I did reach a place of remission. My platelet count normalized, and I actually got to enjoy 10 years with a normal platelet count and no medications. During this time of remission, I got married and I had two beautiful, healthy babies. And 6 months after I delivered my second child, my platelet count just skyrocketed. It went to 2 million. And so it was apparent that I was going to require treatment again. So when I sat down with my hematologists, I was really shocked to learn that there were the same drugs available 22 years ago were the same ones that were being offered to me now. I had concerns because of my previous experience with side effects from interferon. I had concerns about restarting this medicine. And so I actually chose to begin anagrelide. Anagrelide is a medicine, interestingly, it was originally created for cardiac patients, and they discovered that there was a side effect where it lowered platelet counts. So it got kind of temporarily, it was taken off the market and then reintroduced for MPN patients. And I did have success. Anagrelide was a medicine that did lower my platelet counts, but the doses that were required to lower my platelet count caused pretty significant cardiac side effects, just a racing heartbeat, palpitations. It was not a good medicine for me. So we discontinued anagrelide, and an MPN specialist had recommended Pegasus. Pegasus was interesting to me. It was a once-week injection that was formulated to have fewer side effects that the previous interferon that I had tried. And I will say that I have managed to have a better balance between my daily living and side effects that Pegasus will cause. But I do have issues with fatigue and body aches, nausea sometimes, and my hair has become thin again on this medicine. Importantly, though, I get to continue, participating in my children's lives. I get to work full time, and those are things that are obviously really important to me. In the last 18 months, I've had multiple clotting issues despite having a normal platelet count. And these issues have included pulmonary embolisms and recently an arterial clot in my right kidney. So in addition to the Pegasus that I'm taking, I'm also on a regimen of daily aspirin and a blood thinner called Eliquis. And obviously I hope that this combination will prevent any further clots from forming. When I was diagnosed 22 years ago, my parents founded a nonprofit to raise money to research ET. And, their hope was to find a cure. And, we're still looking, we're still searching for that cure. In the meantime, though, MPN patients, do require better treatments that don't compromise the quality to our lives. That's really important. And there are new drugs in the pipeline, that will require clinical trials. Personally, I would participate in a clinical trial if I knew that I would be receiving the treatment and not a placebo. I really appreciate you allowing me to relay my thoughts to you today via video. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there today. I had to have a surgery to repair the artery in my kidney. But I do want to express just my heartfelt appreciation for the FDA and all that it does to further new and effective drug access for all MPN patients. Thank you very much.
My name is Ned, and I am living with PMF. I am just shy of 77 and retired from a full-time job, but still doing consulting work in the pharmaceutical field. In September 2018, I had a routine checkup during which I indicated symptoms of fatigue and weight loss. Blood test indicated anemia. As my hemoglobin dropped further, I started to have symptoms of itching, night sweats, and early satiety, and I was scheduled to see a hematologist in November 2018. Bone marrow biopsy indicated PMF. It also showed several of the associated mutations, including the JAK2 V617F mutation. I have two other factors that have been associated with this cancer: Ashkenazi Jewish heritage and exposure to benzene. A second opinion at the Huntsman Cancer Center in Salt Lake City confirmed the PMF diagnosis. I was told the only cure was a bone marrow transplant, but given the mortality rate with this procedure, I chose not to pursue it at that time. I conferred with my doctors about therapeutic alternatives and did my own extensive research through reliable sources on the internet. The treatments I found were focused on the constitutional symptoms, but did not treat the underlying pathology. In January, I found a reference to the Manifest trial conducted by Constellation Pharmaceuticals. Although only early results were available, it showed the potential to reduce the fibrotic burden and transfusion dependence in a few of the early patients. 2 months of correspondence and an exhaustive medical evaluation at the UCLA Medical Center, the closest site to my home in Utah, I was accepted for the 24-month trial. Since I was Jakafi naive, I was placed in the cohort to receive the JAK2 inhibitor in dual therapy with the study drug CPI 0601. To date, I have not had any serious side effects or surgeries. The Jakafi has most likely caused additional anemia, and soon after the trial began, I started transfusions of packed red cells every 3.5 to 4 weeks. I required blood draws twice a week to check my hemoglobin and platelet values. After 8 cycles in the study, it's 24 weeks, my spleen volume has been reduced by 65%, and the constitutional symptoms are virtually gone or significantly diminished. The draws 2 times a week to check the hemoglobin and platelet levels. Luckily, I can get the transfusions locally and have these blood draws done locally. My platelets have dropped to the 50 to 100 range during treatment, down from the low normal range prior to starting the trial. The need to constantly monitor my blood values and the intermittent transfusions have impacted daily life by having to schedule around these times. Transfusion takes about 5 hours for two units and severely limits any travel. In order to attend this meeting, I had to arrange for an early transfusion this past Friday to cover the time that I would be away. Nonetheless, I have remained physically active throughout and still try and exercise daily. In order to participate in this trial, I make 2 to 3 day trips to UCLA every 3 weeks for tests and to get the next 2-week supply of test drug. Many of these visits are rather routine. I have asked if they could be performed locally and the study drug sent to me, but according to the PI, the FDA rules prohibit that. I'm not sure if it's the FDA or the PI, I don't know. That is something that I would like to see changed, especially for rare diseases where it's difficult to recruit patients into a study on a timely basis. If the number of travel visits were reduced, perhaps more patients would apply and the studies could be conducted much more rapidly. I would also like to see ways to move from one cohort to another in a study if the interim results are showing a far better treatment regimen for a different cohort. Lastly, I'm excited to see that the CRISPR-Cas9 technology is moving to the clinical stage in some diseases and hope that someday it'll be a treatment for PMF. I should live so long for that. I want to thank MPN, first of all, for their website where I found out about this trial initially, and for organizing this meeting, and to the FDA representatives for their attendance and consideration. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Davidson, age 52. I'm JAK2 positive and living with post-PV MF. I'm a mother of 2 recent college graduates. I had these 2 children after I was diagnosed with polycythemia vera and also experienced 2 late miscarriages. Before them, one at 21 weeks gestation and the other at 18 weeks, both due to blood clots from PV. After staying home to raise my children, I recently went back to school to learn ultrasound to give back to an industry that has helped me so much during my difficult time. I have had MPN for over 33 years, being diagnosed at age 19. 7 years ago, at age 45, after living with PV for 26 years, I progressed to MF and have fluctuated between grade 1 and 2 since, depending on my treatment. In my 33 years experience with MPN, I have tried many different treatments, each with its positives and negatives. When my body gets to the point where the negative effect is just getting to be too much, my doctor and I look for another treatment. For example, I've tried 8 different approaches. I developed blood clots during my first treatment of phlebotomy only. I had awful side effects of depression and flu-like symptoms from 7 years of interferon, my second treatment. Varicose bleed from doing nothing during my third treatment, if you want to call nothing a treatment. It turns out the previous interferon caused dangerously low platelets, which led to my GI bleed. During treatment 4, hydrea, my spleen grew and my disease progressed to MF over the course of 6 years. Treatment 5, the original fedratinib trial, was halted, which was unfortunate for me because I was reacting so well to it. Treatment 6, I gave Jakafi a try, but my MF progressed from grade 1 to 2 during my short 1.5-year treatment. During treatment 7, about 3 years on the NS018 trial, my spleen grew to a massive 29 centimeters, almost a foot long. But my MF went back to a grade 1. And so far, I have not had to switch from my current treatment, number 8, which was compassionate use of fedratinib. An ideal treatment for me is something that will shrink my spleen while keeping my blood counts in order, LDH, as well as the usual hemoglobin, hematocrit, platelets, white counts, etc. My doctor uses LDH as a sign of how fast the disease is progressing or if the current treatment is working well. Treatments that have worked for me in the past stopped working, and I'm currently running out of viable options other than more clinical trials. I am happy that fedratinib came back into trial this year and now has been approved by FDA as another available treatment. I am currently back on this medication. Fedratinib is and has been the only thing that has helped to shrink my spleen. I am currently not having many negative side effects from the medication or the current stage of the disease. My blood counts are trending down, but not yet bad enough to dose reduce or stop treatment, but my spleen has shrunk approximately 50% in 9 months. It has never been this small in 27 years. I may look normal and healthy on the outside. Sorry. But I'm a mess on the inside. In addition to splenomegaly, I have esophageal and gastric varices from portal vein thrombosis. And in 2006, I suffered a variceal bleed that I almost did not survive. My whole adult life has been an emotional and physical roller coaster, going from treatments that work until they don't. For me, this disease is such that there is usually no immediate feedback on whether the current treatment is working. It'll usually take years to realize something else is needed. The most devastating news has been my recent discovery of the ASXL1 gene. Knowing that AML is most likely in my future, I am now climbing up from my most recent emotional downturn. My body is damaged from so many years of PV and MF that I currently do not qualify for a stem cell transplant. I hope to fix my chronic physical symptoms of splenomegaly, varices, gallstones, skin cancer from past treatments, and who knows what else, so I can be ready for transplant if I show any progression from now. At the same time, I'm back on a drug that proved to help me a few years ago in trial and so far continues to help me. I have learned to live each day as it is. I've always thought of my personal goals with PV and then MF as they relate to my children. First, to get them to kindergarten, my original 11-year life expectancy mark. Then through high school, as the JAK2 gene had been discovered and research began. Now I want to live to see my children get married. Yeah. As additional advancements and treatments become available. I personally am excited about the future of MPN. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for the full panel. That was incredible. So, as we build on what the panel just shared, these experiences with, a whole range of treatments over time, and the challenges that they've faced in keeping up with treatment and the constant progression of disease, we now want to get a sense of the different treatment approaches and experiences that this audience has, and then we'll go to the audience and ask you to share your experiences as well. So at this point, we're going to go to a set of polling questions. If you can pull out your mobile phone, tablet, laptop, whatever device you are using. We have a handful of questions about treatments that we'd like to ask. If we can go to our first polling question. So our first question for you on this topic is we'd like to know what treatments you or the patient you care for are currently using. And your options here are A, phlebotomy, B, transfusion, C, a drug to directly treat your MPN, D, a drug to treat specific symptoms of your MPN, E, a recent or planned stem cell transplant, F, a recent or planned splenectomy, G, some kind of homeopathic remedy, H, strict diet and or some type of exercise, or I, some other treatment that is not listed on this slide. So please select all of the treatments that you or your loved one are currently using. Yes, you can select all of the treatments that you're currently using. You should be able to select all that apply. All right, we'll give you just a few more moments to get in all of your responses. And again, to remind everyone, the percentages here are percents of responses, not percentages of individuals. So because everyone can select as many as apply, there are many responses. So as the final results trickle in, I think it's clear that the treatment that is being most used by those represented today are treatments that are direct drug treatments for their people's NPN. After that, it looks pretty close. The next most treatments that are used are phlebotomy and drugs that are intended to treat specific symptoms rather than the underlying disease. There's a fair amount of experience with homeopathic remedies as well as strict diet and or exercise. Limited, but some experience of people that are using transfusion, have or are planning to have a splenectomy, as well as some other treatments. So definitely want to hear about what those might be. The one treatment approach that's not been used by those in this audience is a recent or planned stem cell transplant. If we can go to the next question. So drilling down in on one of the options that we had on our last question, we want to know what drugs you are currently taking. And again, you can select all that apply. Your options are A, an anticoagulant, B, a platelet-reducing drug, C, an interferon, D, an anemia improvement drug, E, a JAK inhibitor, F, a chemotherapy, or G, some other type of drug that's directly to treat your MPN. And again, please select all that apply. And as we move into the audience discussion, we'll be wanting to know how well these different drugs are working for you, if there's any symptoms that they've resolved or aspects of the condition that have been maintained or prevented. Want to get a general sense of your experience with each of these and how they may or may not have helped you. So as final responses trickle in, it looks like the greatest experience of those attending today is with anticoagulants. After that, pretty close to one another in order is JAK inhibitors, chemotherapy, and then other drugs. There is experience with interferon and platelet-reducing drugs, and no one is currently using any anemia improvement products. We can go to the next question. So this question is, are you confident that if your current therapy were to stop working for you, that there is another drug that your doctor can potentially prescribe? So how confident are you that if whatever current therapies you're on were to stop working for you, that there is another drug that your doctor can potentially prescribe? Your options here are yes, you are confident that there's another drug. B, you are not confident that there's another drug. C, you're not sure if there's another drug. Or D, this is not applicable because you are not currently on a drug regimen. give you just a few more moments to answer this question on how confident you are that if your current therapy were to stop working, that there would be another drug for you. As it stands, about 40% of you say that you are not confident that there's another drug. Somewhere between a quarter and a third of you say that you are confident, and a similar amount of you are not sure. And then some smaller number of those represented today are not currently on a drug regimen, so this is not applicable. So the largest being the group that is not confident that there would be another drug. We go to the next question. So thinking about trade-offs for what you would be willing to tolerate for a new treatment, what is the most that you would tolerate in exchange for a treatment that would prevent your disease progression for more than 5 years? Would you be willing to tolerate only a treatment that had no side effects or treatment burdens in order to get that outcome? Would you be willing to tolerate mild chronic side effects, things like headache, nausea, or rash, or moderately intensive treatment, such as weekly or biweekly office visits or infusions that take many hours in order to get that benefit? Or would you be willing to tolerate treatments that require prolonged hospitalizations, similar to those required for stem cell transplants, in order to get that outcome? So please select the most that you would be willing to tolerate in exchange for a treatment that would prevent the progression of your disease for more than 5 years. Okay, so as any final responses trickle in, it looks like the vast majority of our participants today would be willing to tolerate mild chronic side effects or moderately intensive treatment in order to get those benefits. Much smaller numbers would be willing to tolerate prolonged hospitalizations, and then a similarly small number would only tolerate no side effects or treatment burden in order to get that benefit. And if we can go to our final question. So this question is, what of your symptoms, which we explored in detail this morning, which symptoms are not adequately controlled despite your current therapy? And here we want you to select all that apply. So please pick all of the symptoms that are not adequately controlled, in your opinion, despite your current therapy. Your options are A, itching or pruritus, B, bone pain, C, fatigue, D, satiety or early feeling of being full, E, numbness, tingling, and burning in your hands, feet, or other limbs, F, night sweats or insomnia, G, vision problems and visual disturbances, H, headache and migraine, I, sexual difficulties, J, progression that you've had to MF, AML, or some other diagnosis, or K, some other MPN symptom that's not listed that is also not adequately controlled despite your current therapy. Okay, just give you a few more moments to get your responses into this question. Okay, so it looks like the NPN symptoms that are not adequately addressed, the largest, or the symptom with the largest number of responses is fatigue. That's followed by kind of in a cluster, numbness, tingling and burning in hands, feet, and limbs, night sweats or insomnia. Closely after that, bone pain, vision problems and visual disturbances, and headache, migraine. And then, not too far behind that, many of the others. There's really no symptom that's listed here that for everyone is adequately addressed with their current therapy. I think that's probably the takeaway from this slide. So with that, we are now going to again broaden our conversation to the audience to continue to get a understanding of these current treatments. So we saw that there was a lot of experience with each of the different treatments, almost all of them. And so, since there are so many treatments that we could talk about, we don't expect to be able to have everybody speak to each of their treatments. Instead, what I'd ask is that if for you, there's a particular treatment that has either worked well, meaning it's helped reduce the symptom burden, it's helped prevent progression to additional burden or health effects, it's done something positive in your life, we'd like to hear about that. And then we'd like to hear, because we know no treatment is perfect and no treatment has no risk, if there for you've had any downsides to that treatment, whether that be a side effect, whether that be just a burden on your life in terms of travel to treatment, time to receive treatment, whatever you might view as a downside. But for you, you'd be helping us understand what amount of benefit you did receive that was worth it to accept those downsides that you're experiencing. On the flip side, if you've had an experience with a treatment that hasn't worked or where those downsides have been too much, and so you didn't continue treatment, we want to hear about that as well. And since we know for each of you, your experiences are going to be greatly diverse, rather than going through the list of every single treatment that we put up on the polling, I want to start off by letting our audience speak to the things that really stand out to them as important experiences to share. Again, whether that be that positive treatment experience, where the benefits of that product for you have outweighed any of the downsides you've experienced, or the flip side experience where maybe you've stopped taking something or chose not to take it because it wasn't worth it or it didn't work. So who wants to get us started this afternoon talking about a treatment experience? And again, I'll just remind before we start, all of our participants in the room, just please remember to say your name and your current form of MPN. And then for all of our webcast participants, as we're working through these questions, continue to email in your questions to communications@mpnrf.org, and we'll be sure to read those as we go through. But go ahead and kick us off.
My name is Jean Deesh. I have PV. I have been on Jakafi. It will be 7 years in December. I would say a great deal of my symptoms have been reduced. So it's been very positive in that respect. I had a bone marrow biopsy done last year, and my bone marrow fibrosis is no longer there. My allele burden has been reduced to a 0.08. And so it's been a very positive thing for me. But then if this stops to working, what's next? That's my big question.
Sure. And have there been any downsides for you for use
Yes,
of this
there
product?
is some downsides, and we don't know. I have, for the past 9 months, been experiencing a vibration in my body. It starts at the top of my head and goes through my complete body, but I have been seen by neurologists. They wanted to make sure I wasn't developing Parkinson's or MS, and the doctors have all ruled that out, but we don't know what it is. Sure. And I still get the erythromelalgia from time to time, and so I take the baby aspirin to help with that, but that's it. I mean, I have mild effects.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that.
I do have a comment from email.
Oh,
Catherine wrote in about her husband who has a diagnosis of myelofibrosis. He's over 70. She said in 2014 he's been anemic since 2008. He got the diagnosis in 2012. In 2014, he barely met the criteria for a clinical trial for momelotinib, recommended by his MPN specialist because of his decreasing hemoglobin and platelet counts. That drug has greatly improved his quality of life by increasing his hemoglobin and platelet counts to near normal levels and minimizing the growth of his spleen. With the improvement in anemia, his energy level has also improved. We so wish this drug were available for those whose primary symptom is low hemoglobin and low platelet count.
Thank you. So, who else would like to share about treatment experiences, perhaps a positive experience where a therapy helped reduce your symptom burden, you feel it's helped slow or stop the progression? Yes.
Hi, my name's Patty Jo, and I have PV. I was diagnosed in October of 2014. I had high red count, white count platelets. I was put on phlebotomies right away, once a week for about a month. And we did that every month, 2 months, blood tests taking. The following year, I was put on Hydrea for 7 days, and I've been on that now since then. I had issue with bone pain, especially in my hands, my feet. A year ago in July, I decided to try CBD through many friends telling me to do it. I finally went and tried it. CBD did not work for me. Another wonderful person at the dispensary suggested I try the THC instead. I am now on 3 TH capsules in the morning. They're 5 milligram apiece. I don't get high. I have no pain. I have no pain. I couldn't bend over for 2 minutes and stand up without pain. I'm pain-free. So that's what I want to tell everybody out here, that there's other options and to try them. And that's where I am, and this is my lovely daughter who brought me here and gave me the courage to stand up and to say that to everybody.
Yes, no, that's exactly what we want to hear. We want to hear what's working, and it can be anything.
Yeah.
I do want to know, you had mentioned the first treatment that you started with were phlebotomies, and whether that was helpful for you, and if so, what did that look like?
I still get them.
Yeah.
I still have to do phlebotomies, and I have an issue with the physician that I'm with right now, unfortunately.
But in general, they're helpful for you?
Yeah, he's an oncologist, hematologist, and he's done MPNs for 25 years. However, everybody probably in this room knows we're the lowest on the rung. They don't listen to us when we tell them we have an issue. His response to me when I said I have an issue with my eye, that has nothing to do with it. There's nothing to do with it, nothing to do with it. Go to find out. It does have something to do with it. And I had one of those brain things right now because it was I just remembered it. My other point I wanted to make to everybody, I wear a bracelet to let everybody know I have issue and medication I'm on. A year ago, February, I was taken to the hospital. They put me on 3 types of medication that sent all my white count sky high, red count sky high, platelets sky high. Worst medication I could have been put on. They put me on it. So I just want to give heads up to everybody in here. If you ever go to the hospital and they say, oh, you're going to get this, oh, we know that, oh, we know about the PV, we know about this, that. Research it more, because a week later, I was back in the hospital again. And I was there for the day and the next day because of everything being so high. But that's just what I wanted to tell you.
Thank you,
Okay?
Patty Jo.
Thank
That was
you.
great. Thank you. other positive treatment experiences, things that have helped? Anything maybe that we haven't, maybe you don't feel we've talked about enough today, or maybe there's a benefit that you received that is a little different than what we've been talking about right behind?
Hi, my name is Vivian, and I am on Jakafi, but I have always had an issue with GI symptoms, and it was getting so bad that we talked about what to do. Should I go on medication for these GI symptoms? But instead, I've gone on a holistic thing for GI symptoms. Okay, I do Greek yogurt in the morning and a probiotic at night. Okay, no fizzies, because I didn't know that, but fizzies really upset your digestive system. And I can't eat eggs, so eggs are out. Do a food log to see what is triggering if you have GI symptoms. See what's triggering it and talk to your doctor about what. But I was just saying to some of my colleagues here is that, try something, and if it doesn't work, rather than going on a medication, another medication, see if you can find something that's good. And it has really helped me a lot with GI symptoms.
Sure. And could you just give us a little bit of maybe a little detail around that? What, if you don't mind sharing, GI symptoms were you having, and how well controlled are they? Are they completely gone, or do you still have a little bit?
I had really severe diarrhea, which was debilitating, which I called a Imodium 2, 4, or 6, depending on how bad it was.
Sure.
And it was unpredictable, and it was affecting my quality of life because I just didn't know when it was going to hit. But now with my, the things that trigger, I found what triggers this. And now it may be once or twice a month, but before it was once a week or so, yeah.
Okay.
It was debilitating.
Yeah. No.
Okay?
Thank you. That's very, very informative. Thank you, Vivian.
I do have some comments again from Julia from this morning, who was
Wonderful.
sharing some of her symptoms, but she's also shared some treatments that she's taken that have been useful. She said Jakafi was the most positively impactful treatment as it quickly reduced severe fatigue and body pain, allowing me to move more and frankly get out of the chair. My body pain had gotten so bad it hurt to hold a steering wheel when driving to and from work. It also quickly controlled her elevated blood counts and lasted for 5 years. However, she developed 3 squamous cell carcinomas in situ over 2 years and had to be tapered off of Jakafi last summer. Her blood counts are still in the normal range, and actually her hemoglobin is better, not anemic. I'm only taking aspirin for my MPN directly. I did want to mention this other thing she said. I do have symptoms still and expect I will need treatment at some point soon. I would also add I take medical marijuana for pain and for the bone pain, leg throbbing, sleeplessness that occurs. I use a lozenge form that works really well with nausea and headaches, migraine that continue.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that from the web. And I'll encourage our web participants to keep sending in comments. It's been very helpful to add to the discussion we're having here in the room. Okay, so let's broaden our discussion about current approaches to treatments. Has there been anything that, perhaps worked in the past but stopped working? I think that is a bit of a theme that we've heard about, and a number of you on the poll said that was a concern, or that you had noted that you may not have another option. And so any experiences with that? Yes.
Hi, I'm Keisha. I started on the Hydrea years ago, and then went to the Jakafi. Was on the Jakafi for, I can't remember, 6 or 7 years. Was weaned off the Jakafi a year or so ago. Started on the Pegasus, and I'm now taking the Pegasus 180 micrograms once a week. And I'm still on the Hydrea, and am very concerned that Pegasus seems to be doing a okay job at the moment, but it is a huge fear for me what happens if the Pegasus stops working, because I don't have any idea what will happen if that stops working. I have the MF at this point, so I feel like this is kind of a last stop, other than the stem cell transplant. So this is my big fear.
Sure. Thank you so much. Other experiences where something doesn't have to be necessarily a drug, but a treatment approach may have worked at one point, no longer works for you for any reason? Okay. And if not that, then we'll keep broadening our discussion on treatment approaches and look to see where there have been some downsides to current treatments. You know, whether that's been a downside you are tolerating or one that you couldn't tolerate, so you've had to stop the product. Have any of you had any of those experiences, whether it be a side effect, any issues with burden of taking a treatment? That would be important to share. Yes. One second.
Jerry Thomas, and I have myelofibrosis. When I had PV, I was put on hydroxyurea and had a violent reaction to it, and went off of that and onto busulfan to control my platelets.
And when you said you had a violent reaction, what was that?
Burning, severe headache, as best I remember, body aches. I remember thinking I'd rather be dead.
Thank you very much, Jerry. That's helpful. And in the back.
Jean Deesh, I've been on the Jakafi. Prior to starting the drug, my doctor had me get the original shingles vaccine. Since then, I have had the shingles 3 times. In January, I had them on my upper hip, the side of my hip, down my leg, between every toe, and the tops and bottom of my foot. I'm in the process of getting the second shot for the newer version. And I know I missed acyclovir, which is a drug I take in the meantime that's holding me over. And I started getting cold sores. So that is another thing that I'm concerned about down the road. Is that going to work for me or not?
Sure. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. We'll go in the back, and then we'll come back to the front.
Hi, I'm Nancy Davidson. I'll try not to cry this time. This isn't necessarily a bad effect from a side effect of,
Sure.
of a drug, but I had the first clinical trial I was on the placebo arm of the fedratinib trial, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. My life was miserable. So I personally don't think once you're being treated for this, you should not go off treatment. That's kind of my lesson on that one. I lost a lot of weight. Actually, it was very evident from many people. What's up with you? You were looking so good 2 weeks ago, and now, or 2 months ago, and now look at you. So I'm glad I stuck it out, because it turns out it's the drug that is currently helping me in my spleen. But anyway, I just want to advocate that I don't think placebo arms of a trial are a very good idea.
Sure. Thank you.
I heard from Julia again, and she had something to share. She said, I have had years of GI distress with daily diarrhea and occasional severe pain that caused me to double over in pain on the floor, unable to talk. I was hospitalized twice for colitis with bleeding. I thought it was Jakafi, but the GI distress has continued, and I'm working with a gastroenterologist who prescribed a sublingual that helps slow down the pain. She's having me try, as I think she was referring to Vivian, suggested eliminating dairy and seeing if lactose may be an issue. I also plan to start a probiotic for lactose digestion, and I'm working on some dietary tweaks, especially given the research that Dr. Scherber and Dr. Fleischman have shared about inflammation in MPNs and the benefits of a Mediterranean diet.
Wonderful. Thank you. Then we had a hand here.
Since I've started the Pegasus, I've had kidney stones 3 times. And just wondering if anybody else has had that experience. I've never had them before in my life. Oh, so yeah.
Yeah, there was an affirmation
I guess
across the room.
that's what this is for.
Yes.
But interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Right here in the front, Ruth. Oh, and then we'll go there. Then we'll come and work our way in the back. Make Lindsay run.
Thank you. So it's Ruth, and I now have myelofibrosis. So I can't remember if I said this earlier or not. So while everyone is passionate, or passionate's the wrong word, people are talking about the complications they've had, which are, so difficult to hear. I've had the opposite experience that I wonder about. I've been on hydroxyurea and only on hydroxyurea other than warfarin, which I don't think of as connected. Obviously it is, but and yet I've said all these years I'm virtually symptom-free. I never really connected those two things, that maybe I'm symptom-free because the hydroxyurea is doing its job. So we always measured the hydroxyurea and the symptoms mattering based only on my blood counts. But I've really never thought about, am I fortunate enough to not have an enlarged spleen and some of the other things that are, are the constitutional symptoms because the hydroxyurea is working. Sure. At the same time, I've had colon cancer and I have growths on my pancreas and I've had kidney stones and on. We could all go on the whole litany of all the things in my body that are wrong, right? And so I question, okay, maybe the hydroxyurea is helping with my constitutional symptoms and including my spleen, but at what expense are these other things a result of the hydroxyurea, which of course for years there's been, a question of whether or not it caused other cancers. So I'm not sure. I always think if it's not fixed, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I've been toying with the interferon, thank you, yeah, we'll just call it whatever, that P drug. And I don't know. I mean, how do we know?
Yeah, no, very
Thank you.
helpful.
Rosemary, this is maybe more of an aside. I wanted to mention that, number one, I have a question about whether GI problems are related to MPN, but I've had irritable bowel, there are multiple names for irritable bowel syndrome. I had it for decades. And after a colonoscopy 5 years ago, my doctor put me on Lialda or mesalamine, which is actually aspirin-based. I don't have any GI problems anymore. Now, I do have inflammation in the stomach, but but it cured it, in which case Julia might talk with her doctor about Lialda, which is the generic mesalamine, which is an aspirin-based.
Sure.
And it was very effective. I felt much better all the way around, emotionally, physically, in terms of, normalcy of bowel patterns. I mean, everything was just, it's like, wow, this is a wonder drug.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Rosemary.
I do have one more from Sarah in Chicago. She said, I had a heart attack after taking anagrelide for my PV. This was in 2004. I was 31 years old. I had to have a stent implant. I now take Pegasus, and it has been working well.
Great. So on the, as we're talking about treatments, we've been talking about what you have tried and how well that's worked and downsides, but have there been symptoms that you have, and I know from the polling questions that there are, that aren't controlled? And is that despite, trying things to resolve those symptoms, or is that because you don't have something to try? Can anyone talk about the symptoms that they have that they mentioned are not currently treated, and tell us a little bit about what treatments you've tried to try to overcome that, if anything? So I know people have symptoms still. You told me that. Anybody willing to share one that they still have that has just not been able to be treated with the treatments that they have tried? Yes, David.
David Alexander again. I'll tell you a little bit more about the transient global amnesia, which I am thoroughly convinced is exactly the same as the so-called silent migraines that I had for years before diagnosis and through diagnosis. And it is a nasty, nasty symptom, and it might be more prevalent among all of us. Perhaps this will help us form more opinions. For me, it starts with blinking in the eyes and sometimes blurry vision. And then if I let it go, and let it go for me means not gulping extra aspirin right away, also accompanied by water. Query, is the aspirin helping or is the water helping? If I let it go, I then get into a confused state, which takes me a while to recognize, and it gets worse and worse. And without drawing out examples, I can't remember anything that just happened many years ago, long before my diagnosis, but this is exemplary. I asked a friend if I could read the newspaper. How did I sound? Yeah, you sound normal. Read the newspaper out loud, same as I just did. I couldn't remember anything about the little bit of newspaper that I read. Nothing. Couldn't tell you what it was about. That's what transient global amnesia is, except it took a long time for me to be diagnosed, because it must be observed and witnessed, and it didn't happen for many years.
And there's been no treatment approach that has worked to kind of reduce this?
In the books, the TGA diagnosis itself says there's nothing that works. It's my impression, as I just mentioned, that catching it can help. Lately, it may also be a low sugar type condition. I don't know, and I've read some literature in very recent days, I'm not going to try and repeat it for you, about glucose metabolism defects in MPN patients. But I frankly, along with a researcher I've spoken to, wonder whether what I describe is more common.
Sure.
But it's not fun.
No, does not sound like it. Thank you very much, David. Other things that are not well treated with 2 comments?
Thank you. I'm Vicky, and I have ET moving into MF. I actually have a question. I've heard a number of patients say that they also seem to have some autoimmune conditions, and I was just wondering if anybody here has one of the MPNs with an autoimmune or autoimmune diseases, and if anybody knows anything about that. I'm sorry it's a little off, but...
Sure. So why Megan did a nice show of hands to see who our patients and caregivers in the room were. For our patients and caregivers, can you raise your hand if you or the person you care for also has any autoimmune related issues? So we're seeing a few hands come up in the room, maybe 5 total. So certainly always free to kind of speak to that. So then right behind.
This is Vivian, and I wanted to speak about fatigue because it was, I was actually part of a clinical trial that was run out of the University of, in Arizona, where Dr. Mesa was. And this trial, we had to go and they looked at our alley burden, and then we did yoga and meditation. And interestingly enough, they tested us at the end of the trial, and the alley burden was lowered. So if you want to try something that's a little bit different, you might try that. And now I'm actually in my 10th week of a trial on mindfulness, which is deals with podcasts, which are sent to us every week. Every Monday I get my little thing to say, go ahead and do the next week. And one of the greatest podcasts that we did was, it was a 10-minute podcast in which they talked about those negative thoughts that come into our minds, okay? I can't do this, you know? This is more than I can manage, or whatever that thought is. And they gave a story about this woman who said she was 72 years old, her husband had died, she wanted to start dating again, right? And the psychologist said, well, why don't you just start dating? And she said, oh, no, nobody wants to date a 72-year-old woman. Who wants to date a 72-year-old woman? Well, he said, well, is that true? And she said, oh, yes. Is it absolutely true? Well, maybe not. And he said, how does that make you feel? It makes me feel lonely and depressed, okay? So he said, why don't you go out and try and see what happens? So like another year goes by and they have lunch again, the psychiatrist and this lady, and he said, well, how did it go? And she said, well, you know, the crazy thing is, I kissed a couple of frogs, but I found Jack. And Jack and I are now going to be married, and we are, so he said, well, what about that negative thought that nobody wants to date a 72-year-old woman, right? And she said, that's gone. So he said, it's anti-negative thought, ant. Every time you get a negative thought, think ant, A-N-T, anti-negative thought.
Yeah. So,
and that will really help.
So how has either the yoga or the mindfulness kind of techniques,
mindfulness helped
how has
me?
it helped you?
Every week I look forward to these crazy podcasts. And you know what? Sometimes they make you laugh. Sometimes there was one I wasn't crazy about, but most of them are, you know, so maybe you can find a podcast or somebody, you know, or TED Talk. We did a lot of TED Talks, and some of them are really motivating. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can uplift yourself with this kind of, mm-hmm. and it's kind of different. Sure. But I'm in 10 weeks. I got 2 weeks to go, and then I'll graduate.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. So we've heard clinical trials come up a couple of times, and certainly, you know, in a condition or like the MPNs, you know, part of the standard of care is participating in clinical trials. And so we have a couple of polling questions that I'm going to ask if we can go to, just to get a sense of your experience with clinical trials and then some of your thoughts about participating and your considerations. So if you can pull out your phones, your devices. Our first question is, what is your experience in and perception of clinical trials for an MPN drug? A, you are currently participating in a trial. B, you have participated in a trial and you would do so again. C, you have participated in a trial, but you would not do so again. D, you have not participated in a trial, but it was because you didn't know about the opportunity. E, you have not participated in a trial, and it was because you were not eligible for that trial. F, you have not participated in a trial, although you were aware of the opportunity and eligible. G, you would never enroll in a clinical trial. Or H, you're not sure of whether you would participate in a clinical trial. So So please let us know, what is your experience in and perception of clinical trials for an MPN drug? All right, we'll give you just a few more moments to respond to this. Looks like responses are just trickling in. sorry to trick you. Just let me know when you've gotten in. Surprise polling. All right. So while final responses are trickling in, let's look at the responses we have. So it looks like the greatest experience that we have of those participating today is that they've not participated in a trial, and that's because they haven't known about the opportunity to. After that, it looks like we have some experience of individuals not having participated in trials, but that's because they were not eligible. We do, however, have experience with individuals that are actually currently participating in studies, those that have participated in studies and say they would do so again, and a few people that have participated but would not do so again. And be interested to know either why you would or why you would not. And then we have some people who have not participated in a trial despite the fact that they were aware of it and they were eligible. Also important, we want to know why ultimately you chose not to participate. Nobody said that they would never enroll in a trial, and there's a small proportion of people who are not sure. So if we go to our next polling question. So regardless of whether or not you've been in a clinical trial, we want to assess which of the following factors related to participating in a trial or related to the test drug in a clinical trial that you would rank as most important to your decision. And we want you to select up to 5 that are the most important. Your options are A, whether you might get a placebo or, for example, a sugar pill. B, whether you would need to stop your current treatment in order to participate. C, what are the potential side effects of that new drug. D, how the drug is taken, for example, whether it's by mouth, IV, or an injection. E, if in earlier trials was the study drug effective for specific benefits that are most meaningful to you. F, knowing if you can make the commitment to participate in the trial. G, the frequency of exam appointments. H, the distance you would have to travel to the trial site. I, the total length of the trial. J, whether a biopsy, like a bone marrow biopsy, would be required as part of the trial. K, negative things that you have heard about clinical trials in general. Or L, some other factor that is not listed on this slide that you would rank as most important to your decision about participating in a trial. So please select up to the top 5 factors that would be most important to you to informing your decision. All right, and we're going to keep this slide up and talk about this a little bit. So for those of you, the number 1 reason or factor listed here is potential side effects. If you selected potential side effects as one of your top 5 factors, what is it that is kind of your decision-making factor here? Are there certain side effects? Is there a certain level of side effects that you would need to not see in order to participate? Let us know what you mean and why you selected that. So, yes, we'll go David and we'll go right back.
I'm Dave. I've got polycythemia vera. With regards to side effects, I would be concerned more about long-term side effects. I would not want to put myself in long-term danger of maybe having another cancer as a result of having a trial for the PV.
Sure.
So
Okay.
that's what would be important to me.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you, Dave. If you can just pass the mic right behind you.
Hi, Vicki. I would be concerned whether the long-term benefits, which we don't know because we haven't taken the drug, would offset the, say, possible messing up of quality of life current. So the idea is we want to beat the disease, but we also don't want to have a poor quality of life. So I guess that would be the balance, the question.
So what quality of life considerations are you thinking of when you say that?
So, I mean, I think ability to work and function socially, mood, does it have depressive side effects? Does it sap people of energy? Does it make one nauseated? I think those are kind of the main things. And then, as Dave said, I think that you don't want to know, you don't want to take something that's going to give you a secondary or tertiary cancer somewhere down the line if it's questionably oncogenic.
Okay.
So.
No, this is extremely helpful. Yeah. Other thoughts, perspectives on potential side effects that would be a big factor in them deciding to participate in a clinical trial? Yep. Hold on one second for the mic.
I don't want to address the current question. I wanted to point out a previous poll in which item A was wouldn't tolerate any side effects for 5-year non-progression. And I suggest to you that that result is affected by two things. You can't interpret it with confidence because it's affected by the patient's or the police's assessment of how likely they are to progress within 5 years.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going with different factors that were important to you. I think we've heard this come up a couple of times, so we want to know if others share this concern about whether you might get placebo and why that would be a concern to you. Would anyone like to, that selected this, it's the number 2 on our list of factors, who would like to speak to potential placebo? Yes.
This actually happened with a study. The placebo was in fact a sugar pill, and I'm pre-diabetic, in which case I said, no way, Jose.
All right. Other considerations around use of placebo? Yes.
I might need some help there.
So if my disease symptoms are so, are I guess moderate or mild enough that I would consider that a placebo would be the proper, I mean, it's acceptable to me, then why would I risk the side effects of something that I don't know? So if what I'm currently doing is okay, why would I enroll in a trial to maybe get something that would make it worse? But at the same time, I wouldn't, I probably didn't say that right, but.
So let me try to see if I understood.
Yeah.
So if your disease was severe enough to where you were seeking out a clinical trial as having some possibility of getting a benefit from an investigational product, then that's the type of trial you wouldn't want to be on placebo, because there's a reason you're seeking out that treatment in the first place. If you alternatively have mild side effect, or not side effects, disease symptoms, then you likely aren't in as much need for an additional treatment, in which case you have a much lower threshold for potential side effects, actually, if you're randomized to drug in that study.
That's it.
So it's kind
like,
of...
It's, which way what is it that puts you one direction or the
Sure.
other? And so that's an ongoing, I guess, a decision that you have to make.
Okay, sure. Other thoughts about use of placebo and whether that would be a factor for you? Rosemary, you want to add to that?
Yes, my father was in a heart study, and he happened to be the placebo, but the medication that everybody received was actually working very well. And in that particular study, they had a caveat that said if it was working so well, the placebo people would get the treatment, in which case I would think that a study should have that option.
Sure. That's valuable. Thank you. Other factors, a lot of you said that if in earlier trials the study drug was effective for specific benefits most meaningful to you, what benefits for you are you thinking about when you say that? What are you looking for to see, some kind of hint of benefit that might, be there for you? Yes.
Hi, this is Sandra again. I think that personally, I would like to have the right to try. If I'm at the end of all possible medications and I've tried everything there is, I think I want to have the right to try anything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And if there was a trial available?
a clinical trial, the right to try to save my life, I would do it, yes.
Okay. And would there be any factors at that point?
Not if
that would-
I'm, at the end of every other option available to me.
Okay.
So I would still like the right to try anything.
And, say, for example, a trial, the only option for a trial was one that did have a placebo control. Would that still be okay for you?
No, if I'm at the end of everything, I want the real thing. I don't think I want the placebo. If I've tried every other drug and option available and things are looking very serious, I would like to try the real drug. That's to see if that'll be my last ditch effort.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Joanne sent via email that she's a PV patient, and it looks like she's already on a trial. She said, I would participate only in open label. Whether the agent works better than current therapy is less important to me. Currently available therapy, I think.
Sure. And any other thoughts? There's a number of factors related to kind of burdens, so how the drug is taken, whether it would be injected or by IV, how long that might take, how often you might have to go, how far you might have to travel, and for how long. Does anyone have any thoughts about those aspects of a clinical trial that would be important? Yes, in the back.
So I have a person in my group and my support group at home, and he's very, very sick with myelofibrosis, and we have gotten him into a trial, and it's been extremely difficult because this person's lost their house, their car, their home. It's really extraordinary circumstances. He has no family here. He's a naturalized citizen, and he's living with a former co-worker, he and his 2 children. When we have patients going to clinical trials, I know it doesn't want to look like we're buying off patients to participate, but we're dealing with patients that are so extremely sick that don't have the income. So then there's these barriers put up. And as a support group leader, I've done everything I can do to help him. I've gone and helped him get Social Security, although he doesn't have much Social Security because it's based off of part-time work because he was so sick. So I fought with the Social Security. They told me it was going to take over 2 years to get this man benefits. And he's not even 50. And so I told Social Security that cancer doesn't know any boundaries. And they don't care what his age is. So after working for over a year and a half, we finally got those benefits. And now he participates I guess about every 3 weeks. He comes to town. He goes from Pittsburgh to New York. And I've been trying to find ways to get money for him to get to New York. Out of the clear blue skies, and thanks to somebody through Leukemia Lymphoma Society, he is a guardian angel in this person, and I hope to God he continues to help. But he's helped me get airfare to go from Pittsburgh to New York. And it costs about $425 every trip he makes. And the thing is he's seen tremendous progress from what he was. And I just would hope anybody else out there that wants to participate, that is extremely sick, would be able to get that assistance, because this is a tremendous burden to him and, frankly, anybody that's trying to help him.
Sure. So it's not the amount of time to travel, things like that. It's the financial burden of participating.
He has all the time right now. He just doesn't have a dollar to his name.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other things like that?
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
This group is an extraordinary group. And I believe most of us here are very proactive people, we self-advocate for ourselves. I mentor through Cleveland Clinic's Fourth Angels and Intermen's Angels. And there's a lot of patients out there that don't know how to advocate for themselves. And they don't have the physicians that some of us have as our research doctors. And I hear this horror stories of how their doctors are treating them. And I mean, it's unbelievable. Where I was in 2009 when I was diagnosed to where we are today. These physicians still don't believe it's a cancer. They still don't believe in some of the drugs that we have that have been approved, or some of the drugs that are weird, Pegasus and other things. And I feel sorry for these people because a lot of them, either their age doesn't allow them, or they're just not people that know how to self-promote. And I think probably most of us in here, the only reason we're alive is because we know how to advocate for ourselves. And for that, I want to thank every one of you physicians and the foundation and the FDA for coming and listening to us.
Thank you. So I think the one experience that we were sharing and the financial burden, maybe I will flip the question around a little bit. Is there anything that would make it easier, would make you more likely to participate in a clinical trial, whether it be some aspect of the way the study is designed? We've talked about whether you could maybe, if you were on placebo, if the study showed some benefit, you could switch over to the active drug. We talked about the potential financial barriers that exist. What else would make you more likely to participate in a clinical trial? Any thoughts on that?
I was going to ask that question. I've never done a clinical trial. When you do a clinical trial and there's travel, do they usually pay for your travel?
So it is totally study specific, whether or not that is. So if
study specific.
Yes. So if that's something, is that something that would make you more likely to, just so we're, because for you.
For me, if it required travel, yes, they would have to help me. Like if it was, so that would be the answer for me. That would be the answer for me.
Okay.
That it would require financial assistance. I could not participate.
And something that required travel without.
I would be more than happy to do it for all the right reasons, but if it required financial, I could not. So that would definitely be the answer.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and that wasn't up there.
Ned Weinshenker, I didn't mention this when I was speaking. These 34 trips that I'll take to UCLA, they're not being paid for by the sponsor.
So that's all personal.
There are some foundations, though. I haven't applied for it in this case, but there are some foundations that help with travel and accommodations if you're going to a clinical trial. I think one of them is the Good Day Foundation in Texas. So that's something to look into. And again, your advocates, either your social services should help with that, or hopefully your doctors, if they're MPN specialists, they might know about it. But and also, you really have to be proactive with the doctors. The one at the Huntsman Cancer Institute, when I told him that I was interested in this particular clinical trial, he said, well, we're not part of the trial here in Utah. And I said, I understand that. I looked on clinicaltrials.gov, and I looked at all the clinical sites. I said, UCLA looks like the closest. He said, yeah, but you have to travel there. And I said, that's okay. He said, I actually heard their presentation in December of 2018, and it sounds really good. So I'm with you on this. If you want to apply for it, I will help you apply to get into that trial. So you really have to bring it to their attention if it's not going on in their own clinic. It's just, they're busy. They're all busy doctors, extremely busy, especially in hematology oncology. So you really have to be your own advocate. And again, I thank the MPN Foundation, because the first notification about this particular trial was you published the press release from the company in January, and I followed up from that and continue to research it.
Sure. Great, thank you, Ned. So if we can go back to the discussion questions, there is one experience that's come up that is a treatment experience that we haven't heard much about yet today, which is with stem cell transplant, and that's come from the web. So I want to turn to that and hear about that experience.
So thanks. This is from Rabbi Ron, who's in New Jersey. He reported he had ET for 25 years and had no constitutional symptoms. I realized how fortunate I was. I had no drug treatment during that time. The ET progressed to MF 4 years ago with no constitutional symptoms until my 3rd year, when I had bone pain in my legs. Tylenol took care of it. During those 3 years, I had weekly injections of Procrit, and twice he had infusions. He said, when the poll asked about risks we are willing to take, I did not want to think about a bone marrow transplant for the first 3 years. I had MF, but as my disease progressed, then I was willing to consider it. And after a haploid transplant with my son as the donor, here I am a year later, feeling fine, only a slight case of GVHD, graft versus host disease. Thank you, Rabbi Ron.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi Ron. So with our remaining time, we have one final question, and this is where we turn from talking about your past experience, whether that be your treatments, your clinical trials, and we look to have you share with us your priorities, your preferences for future treatment. And so the way that this question is asked is, certainly we all would like a cure for your MPN, but short of that cure, what specifically would you look for in an ideal treatment? So what we're asking here is essentially what is it that you're looking for from a future treatment, from that next drug that could be in the pipeline, and why would whatever you're looking for be important or meaningful to you? Jerry, you want to start us off?
Yes. To stop the progression of a disease. I mean, I can feel what it's doing to my body, and I'd like to halt that, and then, of course, a cure.
Sure. And just remind us for you, what would progression next look like for you?
I wouldn't have fatigue. I wouldn't have blood clots.
Or, I'm
Fever,
sorry,
no fevers, is that what you mean?
if a future treatment couldn't stop the progression,
If it couldn't stop the
yes.
progression.
What is it that you are worried that would happen next?
Well, of course you face mortality, but you do anyway. No matter what you have, we're all gonna face that.
Sure.
But I would like to have quality of life, for sure, to be able to travel. I can't get on an airplane. So, quality of life.
Preserving that. Yes.
Relief of the symptoms would give me quality of life. I'd like to be able to see my grandkids in Oklahoma, go home, but I like Texas too.
Yes. No. Thank you so much, Sherry. That's
One comment did come in actually through email that they noted that there was, when we asked the question about what do you fear most, death was not on the list. So.
Yes. So, what else, short of that cure, would be important for you? What is your priority, your preference? If you could get some benefit from a future treatment, something that you don't have now, or what would that look like? This is your chance. We've got the FDA in the room, we've got the drug developers in the room, we've got the researchers in the room. You get to tell them what it is that you're looking for. So, Ruth? Yeah, getting your step count up.
So thank you. This is the big question. For me, hearing so many others in the room about chronic and really serious anemia, not being tired but not being able to get out of bed, for me, that's my biggest fear. I don't have that, thank goodness, but if I wanted a new drug and I wanted a new solution, that to me is what I hear in the room and personally what's most devastating. We all deal with pain. I can deal with pain. You take something for pain. But if you can't get out of bed, it means your livelihood is compromised and we can't enjoy the reason we all want to keep living.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it could be a specific symptom like that. I think that's very helpful to understand that fatigue, treating that disabling fatigue that so many have talked about would be a top priority. Rosemary?
A long-term solution.
And what do you mean by that?
I mean, it seems, because I'm not on any drug, that a lot of the drugs people have tried have been short-term. They've worked maybe up to 5 years, not necessarily for 25. I mean, some have, but that's depending upon who you are and what symptoms you have. But it seems, what I would understand in taking away is that a lot of these drugs are short-term, not long-term.
So you want something that's durable in its
Yeah.
effect. And for you, what would that durable treatment
Well, since I
benefit
deal
be?
with fatigue,
No, that's
that would be an important issue. And certainly the point that was made, if it couldn't get out of bed in the morning, that would be terrible to me. That's why I worry about strokes. It's like, how can I function?
So you told us earlier today about your day and what that looks like, and I'm very glad to see that you made it back after lunch and are with us. I know you talked about needing to rest and recover, and I hope you aren't going to pay for it.
I
from
had
this.
my cup of coffee this
Oh,
morning.
yes. But what amount of benefit on fatigue? How much improvement would you need to make your life better?
Well, I can deal with my fatigue right now. I might not in the future, but as long as I can deal with fatigue, because if I get enough sleep, then I can make it through the day. If I watch my diet, I tend to need a lot of protein in my diet, and if I start slipping and eating too much tofu or seafood, I can tell the difference.
So you wouldn't want your fatigue
Without having
to get,
a blood test.
so right now you don't need the treatment for fatigue, but
no.
if it got worse.
But if it got worse.
Sure. Thank you very much. That's helpful. What are others' priorities? We'll work our way to the front.
I would look for an affordable treatment. I think for all of us that we're all, that's the big, thing in the room is these drugs are so expensive. And if we can't get them through our insurance or we don't have insurance, there's so much uncertainty out there that it would be nice for people with chronic illnesses not to stress about having to come up with huge amounts of money, which would put you in jeopardy. So something that's affordable, that can be taken relatively easily.
And what do you mean by relatively easily?
Well, a pill is good.
Pill is good.
You know, I mean, it's a lot better than,
Is an injection okay?
Injections, yeah. If it was an injection, I know Ropeg and Interferon is an injection every 2 weeks, and that would, I would be good with that. And that has put people into remission, so maybe the FDA could look at maybe some trials on that.
Thank you.
In Europe, it's been very successful.
All right, so we'll come up to David, then David. Or Dave and David.
I've found it oddly comforting that so many people are having cognitive impacts from these diseases, and it shouldn't be comforting, but at least I kind of feel like I'm sharing the experience.
Sure.
I would like to see more research in the area of the impacts of these disorders on mental health and cognitive issues, and I'd love to see those addressed in a new drug.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Hi, David Alexander again. Let me tell you a story. When I was taking Jakafi, I bumped up to 15 milligrams twice a day to try and conquer pruritus, and it eventually worked. But I visited my MPN expert, and he said, gee, you're doing pretty well. Why don't you think about going back down to 10, because maybe the infection risk will be lower. We don't know. As you've heard, I've discontinued Jakafi because of life-threatening infection risk, and I'm at peace. I'm at peace because in his skilled way, my expert let me know about the risk, and I could assess it and balance it. He didn't scare me. He just put it out there, and I knew that it was real. My ask is, give us very good data, including after phase 3, on what the risks are, so that when we don't have a perfect drug, and we're all waiting for that, but we're not going to get it, we can be at peace with the decisions that we have individually made.
Sure. The information on both benefit and risk. Understood.